All right, you should be good.
All right, it's 6:02. I'm going to call the Finance Committee meeting to order. And Mike, do you want to read the statement that we have to read?
Um,
You want me to try to find it?
well, no, we can just summarize it that this is being recorded under the governor's March 2020 suspension of portions of the open meeting law executive order. While we make every effort to have all of our public meetings televised with options for the public to view when technology allows. Should that not happen, a full recording of this video as well as the transcript and minutes of this meeting will be posted as soon as possible, even prior to the minutes being approved. That way the members of the public have the ability to review what we are doing here as soon as possible after the meeting in accordance with the executive order.
Okay. First order of business be the March 26 minutes.
I make the motion to approve the March 26 minutes as printed.
I'll second.
Any questions, comments, changes? All in favor?
Aye.
Oh, do I have to call everybody?
Yes, because it's virtual.
Okay, Peter,
Aye.
Dave,
Aye.
Carol's not present. Ted,
Aye.
Tom,
Aye.
and Karen.
Aye.
Okay. Minutes are approved. Next is the school budget. I'm trying to see what I have here. Sorry.
There's time, just a notification that town meeting has been postponed by the select board. What the select board is asking is for input from our different boards and commissions, as to the date that should be postponed to. Because elections also have a financial impact to the town, I do also want to let you guys know that is being postponed as well. The select board has also not set a date for that yet. Under our current bylaws, the way that the elections and town meeting are held is all that's written is the election has to happen on the second Monday of May and the town meeting happening the Saturday preceding that. However, with the legislation that's been approved and signed by the governor into law, the town meeting can now happen anytime prior to September 1st, and the election has to happen sometime prior to June 1st. So depending on the input we received, the select board has the potential to move the election prior to town meeting if that is the case. However, no decisions have been set yet. They're looking for input from our boards and commissions on when those dates should be. The dates that are currently being thrown around is having the town meeting on Saturday, June 27th. That's the last Saturday in June. And then the election on Monday, June 29th. What that would do is keep the schedule that we currently have in early May and move it back to the latest date possible we could have it with that schedule, since the election has to happen on or before June 30th. But in your drives, you will see a draft of the warrant for a town meeting, both the annual and the special. There are about ballpark 7 articles for the special and ballpark 17 for the annual. So those we can review at our next meeting. But I wanted to make sure you guys saw that you had those and had the opportunity to review them prior to the next meeting. What you'll also see in your drives is a budget that's in connection with the email that you should have all received from me yesterday, informing you that all of the Wachusett towns except us and Holden had put out directives to their departments for level funded budgets due to our concerns with revenue for next year. These concerns mainly come from the fact that the current crisis that we're in right now with the coronavirus is impacting a lot of things. Particularly, people aren't going out and buying cars. We don't know if the decline in the market is eventually going to affect valuations for homes that will affect people's tax rates. And about 98% of the money we receive from the state in local aid is actually the revenue that the state receives from lottery sales. And for the most part, that's all we receive from the state is our share of the profit of what the lottery makes. And it's apportioned out based on a formula on population. So people aren't out buying lottery tickets right now. People aren't out buying cars now, which is the biggest, what we see as the biggest increases in our excise taxes. Same thing with boats. that fall under excise. People aren't out buying boats right now. So things like this could cause us to have an impact on our revenue for next year. So that is why we went and I redid the budget at a level funding, except for our contractual obligations or things that we don't have control over, our loan payments, our Medicare, our unemployment costs, which could go up as a result of what we're doing right now, where the Safe Place workers are currently on standby collecting because they aren't doing their after school work and the revenue isn't coming in for us to pay them. And while Sarah and I are working on a plan to repurpose them so that if school is canceled for the remainder of the year, we do have a way that we can afford to have them on the payroll for doing a different test. We aren't there yet. So I want to make sure that we're in a good financial setting for next year. So you have that level funded budgets that's there. And also because the Finance Committee asked at our last meeting, I provided you all with the draft of next year's payroll certification. What that does is it breaks down each position and how much they're paid each year and what account they're paid out of. Excuse me. And if someone's pay is broken out between multiple accounts, and I'll use Director Buckley for an example, his total pay is listed in the budget, but in reality, a portion of that comes out of water and sewer. So the payroll certification actually breaks down how much comes out of those accounts so you can adequately see what accounts come out there. The same thing with the Board of Health Secretary, where 10% of her salary comes out of the Inspectional Services revolving account. So you now have all of that in your drafts, in your drives as well for our discussions next week. So I want to make sure, because that's a lot to review, that you had ample time to review it, which is why it wasn't on tonight's meeting. But I wanted to make sure you all knew what you had in your drives and why that is there. So that is there now. When you're reviewing the town meeting warrants, please go with option 2 for the annual town meeting. The reason for that is when they were uploaded, we didn't know whether or not the select board would vote to separate the election warrant from the town meeting warrant. If you remember, traditionally, the last item on the warrant for the annual town meeting is the election warrant, and we post them both together. However, because of the potential separation of the two this year, the board voted to post them separately of each other as advised by our town council. So I'll go with option 2. The only difference is that last page is not there. So that is where we are with town meeting. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
So Mike, from the perspective of the timing, we're saying that it's the last Saturday in June?
Yes.
Excuse me. And that's the last time that we could possibly do it?
That's the last time we could possibly do it. That sticks with our current schedule of having the town meeting before the town election. The law that was just passed by the governor allows us to have town meeting in July or August if the situation calls for it. What would push it to keep that schedule is the new law around elections says elections have to happen prior to the new fiscal year. Now, that's an excellent question, though, because that raises the question, what do we do if we cannot have our town meeting prior to the start of the fiscal year?
Right.
So what the statute now says is we would do what a school district would do if their towns vote down their budget. What we would then do is take this year's current budget, divide that by 12 among the departments, and then tell each department, this is how much you're allowed to spend this much. So we go on what's called a 1/12 budget until we get the full budget passed, and then that kind of replenishes the accounts. If I'll use the union contracts for an example. So the union contracts that were signed last year do have increases built into them on top of this year. Now, going on a 1/12 budget for those departments that have unions probably isn't going to be enough. So what the states then said is we pull the difference from our free cash directly. So if we go into the next fiscal year and we haven't had town meeting yet, we go on that 1/12 budget with the difference coming out of our free cash. The statute also says that any accounts that we're spending money that is directly related to our response to the current pandemic, we have to keep track of every penny that we spend there, because those accounts are now allowed to be deficit spent. So we
Oh.
can go over budget on those accounts. And how we make that money back is we amortize that on the tax rate over the next 3 years. This is exactly what the state allowed us to do back in 2015 when it seemed like we had a 3-foot snowstorm every Monday, where we just didn't have the free cash to make up the deficit that we had in snow and ice. So they were like, it worked then, let's do that now. So we basically tack that on to the tax rate over the course of the next 3 years, and that's how we make up that deficit for everything that we don't receive reimbursement from MEMA or FEMA, the Massachusetts Emergency Management Agency and the Federal Emergency Management Agency.
So right now, the town administrator's request, level funding,
Yes. Yes.
gets us still $220,000 shy of the
Correct.
goal, right?
Yes.
So we are expecting that we're probably not going to have the same amount of, let me call it revenue, but sourcing from the state as we did before. So
Correct.
that number is likely to be bigger. The need there is likely to be bigger, right?
So yes and no. And let me explain what I mean by that. So when we make the budget, we purposely build in a little wiggle room.
Right.
So we have a cushion in the revenue that we don't allocate for in the budget. What we would normally do is if we get down to about if we get down to about $100,000, we can probably massage the revenues enough to a part where we're comfortable in saying, okay, this is actually balanced right now. We can be a little more on the more aggressive side here because we're in a comfortable spot. That's something I thought we were going to be able to do, but because of the situation, I'm just not comfortable bumping the revenues any more than we already have. Because if something hits the fan, I want us to be able to have that cushion as much as we possibly can. I wouldn't recommend what some towns are doing and looking at using funds from their stabilization accounts to level fund their budget this year. To me, your stabilization account is your savings account for when you have situations like this, but we're already in a spot where we're using free cash to fund $150,000 of the budget per the policies that the town passed in 2015. If we then add stabilization money into that, then next year, even if we're already on a better financial footing, we're inflating our budget with revenues that we may not have again. Because who's to say our free cash is going to come in at the adequate number that it has been the past couple of years? And if we use our stabilization account, we don't have the money to put back into that from there. Plus, that negatively affects our bond rating if we use our stabilization account. Our bond rating, for those of you who don't know, is our town's credit score.
So from the perspective then of the likelihood or the going forward number,
Yes.
the revenue really is at risk right now. I mean, you
Yes.
had initially indicated that, excuse me, people aren't buying boats and they're not buying cars. And the lottery, you know, like the Keno stuff is gone, pretty much gone because nobody's in the
In
restaurants
the
now.
restaurants. Yeah.
So if we don't have, if we're being anywhere near optimistic about what might happen there, we could get ourselves into a significant issue. Now, what happens if, and so this is just me asking a newbie question, but what happens if we go through the process and we make our budget based upon our best guess, and then our best guess turns out to be really bad? What's the process then?
The town administrator would then have to put in a spending freeze. And at the special town meeting that we'd have in the fall, we'd have to adjust the budget to those amended levels.
Okay, so that's the relief valve as a special town meeting.
Yes.
Can I interject here for 1 second?
Sure.
So that was my point. I was going to try to interject there, was that if we get to July 1st and then we go on to a 1/12 budget, but just like Pete just said, all those things don't come through. What if we have to go below this year's budget? With the people out of work, with the way the economy is, et cetera, we may have to go below what this year's budget is.
It's true. And that's something that we're going to have to track weekly in the next fiscal year, is how the impacts what we're seeing are coming in. particularly
Right,
with, oh, go ahead.
because if you start off on a 112 budget for the first 3 months and we have to end up going lower than that, then as the end of the year comes around, we really have to chop stuff to make it through the year.
Yeah, correct.
So would that mean, Mike, that the likelihood is that this group is going to have to be more active this next year because there'll be lots of things coming up to say, well, not what we thought, so let's go back and take a look at it again and be a little bit
I
more
don't-
proactive?
I think it would be helpful. The finance committee by bylaw is already required to meet once monthly.
Yep.
It might not hurt around the time that each quarter is closing to bump that up a little bit, just to do a quarterly revenue check.
Right.
Because we'll be tracking weekly and bi-weekly in our office here. But as it gets closer, it's probably good to track the budget as close as possible that way, just because we have the uncertainty. Do I think we're going to go belly up because of this? No. I think we are, if based on what I wasn't here 5 years ago, but based on what I've seen in the town finance reports, 5 years ago, would I have said that? Probably not. But I think we're in a good enough financial sitting now. Our bond rating is in a good enough spot, and we have the keys in place that we should be stable for next year.
Okay.
That said, the items that we could not level fund, again, are our contractual obligations with our employees and our collective bargaining units, our debts, and then the two things that we don't have, the two line items in the budget that I don't have control over in the slightest are our two school districts. Now, that's been a discussion that I've been asked to bring up by a couple of members of the finance committee, and it's in fact the next item on the agenda.
Mhm.
So Ian, if that's okay with you, we can move on to that unless anyone else has other questions.
I'm just going to have, the state, I see Ted has a question too,
Oh, okay.
but I don't think the state has even come close to having what numbers they're going to have, and they may end up having extra money to help the towns come back through. I know that's
Yes,
discussion.
that is a possibility, particularly with some new initiatives that were announced as early as this afternoon. However, where the concern is the state's revenue is also down now too.
Correct.
Particularly now that they've moved the income tax date all the way into the next fiscal year. So now that money's not coming in now, that's coming in the next fiscal year for them. So they're already looking at readjusting their revenues. And what the concern is for cities and towns across the state is that that's going to be made up in reductions to what we've been told are going to be our local aid numbers and our Chapter 70, which is our school aid numbers, but also increases in our charges that we owe the state every year, which come in on the cherry sheet. Now, Governor Baker and Lieutenant Governor Polito have always upheld their commitment to put the cities and towns first and make sure that we do have increases in funding every year. But this is a situation that no one expected. I'm sure that their administration's working hard to figure everything out just with everything that's going on right now. But we just don't know with the uncertainty that's happening right now.
Okay, and Ted?
I thought before we move off of town meeting date, you were looking for kind of a recommendation from us. And does, when the meeting happen, impact those budgeting issues that you were just explaining to us? Like, is there a good reason to have it before July 1st or not?
Yes. So we would like a recommendation. The select board did ask me to get that. Thank you for reminding that. That's what happens when I just go on stream of consciousness. But there is a benefit to having this before the July 1st deadline. Going into a 1/12 budget is messy. We've seen it with the school district before, for good reasons, don't get me wrong, when the town has decided that. And we've seen it in other places before, and it tends just to lead to a lot of extra confusion. A lot of different bills that we pay are upfront on July 1st. So not having all that revenue there could make us into a spot where we just don't know what to do. It often leads to furloughs where people are still on our payroll, but we just have to say, take a week unpaid. So there's a big benefit to having the town meeting prior to the 1/12 budgets.
So how should we proceed with this now? Should we make a motion to Ian, should we make a motion to go ahead and recommend a date?
That's what I was, yeah, that's what I was just gonna say. I think we should have a motion on, to recommend a date and have that forward from us.
I'd like to talk a little bit about what I heard from Dan Didi last night of the Wachusett Regional School District. They're saying that they're going to have to, their recommendation is they're going to have to be looking at redoing their budget. They're not sure when they're going to get a chance to do this. It didn't make me feel all warm and fuzzy that anytime soon we're going to see any kind of firm numbers from them.
So Karen, do you think that maybe that June 27th date is too soon?
Yeah, depending upon how the school's coming in, that's 57, 58% of our budget. And if that's going to go down, then we could actually do more in our departments. I understand the 1/12 budget and nobody wants to do that, but Dan said that they're preparing to do a 1/12 budget. They're already planning for that. So I'm thinking that we're not going to have firm numbers from the school district in time for a June meeting. Now, they might surprise us, but I doubt it.
Also a good point.
Should we be prepared with the proposed date and give that information to the school board or to the district and let them know that that's what we're shooting for?
Go ahead.
I had a long discussion last night. It was an hour discussion with Dan Didi. I'm trying to get a copy of the budget book that was promised to us on March 9th. The school department has pretty much, the end of the world is coming and they've not doing anything. The budget book will not be, right now is being held up to being published by Daryl McCall. I have made a public information request today to have that issued to me, and then in which case I'd be more than happy to share it with you guys. I would like to see where the budget is now so that when they make any changes, we can then see where those changes are being made. Right now we have, what, a 12-page presentation, 20-page presentation of graphs and charts, but no real meat to it. So it's 58% or 57% of our budget. I think that we're going to make decisions based upon this budget that we have no backup to. I think that we're going to have to, I think June's going to be pushing it.
So would it be appropriate for us to make a recommendation that the date be X, whatever that date is, contingent upon the Wachusett School District having its information available 2 weeks prior to that? I mean, is that practical?
Ian, if I can jump in real quick.
Yeah, go ahead, Mike, because I had a couple things too. Go ahead.
All right, sorry. If I accidentally cut someone off, it's only because I can see only 4 people on my screen because I'm on my phone. What I would recommend is this committee has another meeting prior to the select board's next meeting anyway. So we could see what happens within the next week and then revisit this then to see if it's worth making a recommendation or just saying push it to the next fiscal year. With how fast things have been moving on the staff side of both the town and I'm guessing the school, because if it's anything like we're doing, it should be like that as well. We'll probably have some type of a better idea, at least on state numbers or what we can expect by next week. It won't be a finalized idea, but it'll be a better idea.
Yeah, that was my comment too, Michael, was that we should probably wait until next week to bring this back up again.
Yeah, I know Tom did have something too. Just
no, I don't have him on my screen.
Yeah, if I can interject here, if the with all the moving targets going on now everywhere, I think there's not a way that we can really recommend a date right now. I mean, it's going to be several weeks before we can pin down all these things that are happening to really make any sense. Yeah, maybe the election has to happen by the first of the coming fiscal year, but as far as the town meeting goes, that's kind of going to be an up in the air thing for a while yet.
yeah, and the good news is we have our deadline to post the town meeting date is 2 weeks prior to it being held. So it's not like we have to do anything right now too. So long as we do it with 2 weeks notice, that's fine. It's just the board asked for opinions. And if the opinion of the board is if the committee is we need to wait, then that's the opinion I can carry along too. But we can also, like Ian and I were saying, I would recommend waiting a week and seeing what's up.
Karen, can I ask a question? Karen, do you think you'll hear anything on this report? I mean, have you given up on them ever giving you anything? Do you think it'll come in a week? I mean, it doesn't sound like it.
Today, sending out a public information request, I have to, by law, hear something within 10 days.
Okay, okay, good. And so, Mike, are we?
I'm expecting an excuse. I'm expecting an excuse, but they were very, I was on the phone for an hour last night, and my husband said, why didn't you just hang up? Because every time I asked a question, they had a go around. We got nowhere.
Yeah. So, Mike, are we having a meeting next week and the following week?
Yes. Yeah. Just like we've been doing, we'll be having them weekly. Yeah.
Okay.
So what should we do with this? The board is recommending that we wait a week. Do we need to formalize that?
No.
I don't think we need to formalize that. I think we just, this is our own, and we'll wait until next week, and then we'll make our recommendation if that's what we think.
Okay.
But Mike can at least let them know that we had a discussion and we weren't ready.
Yeah.
I would like to make a motion that the finance committee send a letter to the school department, letting them know that we're not going to vote favorably on their budget as currently as it is.
Second.
Third.
Just, okay, so we have a motion and a second and a third to send a letter to the school committee, letting them know that we are looking at voting unfavorable on their budget. Discussion?
I just add, Ian, that this is the next item on the agenda because Princeton just did this last week, and another town is also looking at doing this very shortly. So I was asked by a couple of the members to put this on the agenda, so that's why it's there.
Yep.
But if they do readjust the budget, this has potential to send a message that it can't go up because we can't afford what we currently have. But it's, yeah, they're going to come back with a different budget. It's just whether or not they come higher or lower.
Bob, this is let them know, I think that's our discussion.
Yeah.
Any other comments, Tom?
Well, I don't see how they can come any higher. I mean, they know what the turmoil is out there now. It's got to be lower, and it would be I don't know what the right word is. If they came back with something higher, it would be totally crazy.
Well, so,
I'm just going to try to go through a little bit, Pete. So I'm just going to ask Ted, then I'll come back up because he was on my list for comments on it, on the letter.
On the letter?
Yeah,
I think it makes sense. I think we want to say the current budget, and would we put language in that said the current figure or anything higher? I don't know if we need to do that to cover it, or is that understood?
I think that's a good part to have in there.
I would say that, this is the only budget any one of us has seen. It's the only budget any of the towns have seen. So just saying that we won't vote favorably on this.
Yeah.
I don't think we want to say we want it to go lower down to 2%. They're not going to listen anyway. So we're just going to send out the message that it's not going to go favorably and do something.
Okay. I'm going to go back. Ted's got his one, finish up his comments.
Should we include in the letter a request to get the current budget, the one that you're asking about, Karen, or the book on it?
I think we did that at our meeting, and they told us they would give it to us, and they never did. So I think the way that Karen is going through and asking the legal way to do this now is what we have to do. Carol, any comments?
No, not on this subject. We're going to still talk more about school in a minute, right? Or is it?
But we're talking really about, it's about that whole budget, so I'm not sure what you're thinking.
Well, the only question I have, and I don't know if it's for further in the meeting, but with everything that's going on right now, is there any way that, I know this is ridiculous, but that we would get any money back from this year's budget? I mean, does anything changed? Obviously, everything's changed, but there's still
Yeah.
people.
Well, Mike, can you answer a little bit about what the governor had said about we have to keep the payments going?
Yes. So the governor's ordered that we don't get the money back. The reason being is the teachers are still on payroll, so they still have to be paid. The custodial staff operations are still happening in central office. Where we may see something, and it's a massive may, and I, to be completely honest with you, highly doubt it, is the school districts statewide are negotiating with bus companies right now for a reduction on their assessments because they're not delivering kids anymore. But then again, the bus drivers are still on the payroll. So it wouldn't be a full cut, it'd be a reduction. So there's some areas where we may see some money. I'm highly doubtful of it though, just because there's so many different dominoes that have to fall into effect before we get that. The governor's also required the state to pay all out-of-district special education placements, even if those students are not currently going there right now, because they're viewed as an extension of the school. So just like the schools still have to get paid, they still have to get paid as well. I think it's just part of the whole, no one's been in a situation like this before.
Okay, Mike, let's just cut it back.
Yeah.
That's just a real quick, and if we can come back to this afterwards. Peter, you're next on my list. Sorry.
Yeah, now